What is the difference between a managed forest and an unmanaged forest? Like a lot of things with forests, that may seem like a simple question, but it's actually much more complicated than it seems. One of the reasons why we might not manage a forest is because we're recognizing that old growth forests are really cool. There aren't a lot of them on their landscape. They have all these incredibly important and valuable ecological attributes. And we want to let those forests accrue those attributes on their own. So we're not going to manage them as a means of helping them later attain this old forest status. Passively managed forests are a totally important part of our landscape. In the forests I manage, a lot of them have reserve zones, areas that we're not managing in the traditional sense, and we're just going to let them become old growth forests eventually on their own. As we talk about the difference between a managed forest and an unmanaged forest, it's really important that we're super clear about a few different things. The first is that here in Vermont, and certainly much of the eastern United States, all of our forests are really young. Most are 60 to 100 years old. And we know that to develop the ecological attributes of an old growth forest that make them such amazing habitats and give them these amazing qualities could take centuries. So it's not like if you decide to not manage your forest is an old growth forest tomorrow. If you decide to not manage your forest, in most cases, your forest will be an old growth forest in 200 years. And that's if everything goes perfectly. So we also need to recognize that we have altered these ecosystems to the extent where just leaving a forest alone may not be enough to let it become an old growth forest. There's a lot of sort of weird ideas that have been built up about humans and our relationship to nature. One of the most insidious of these is just this idea that if we just leave it alone, that everything in nature will be fine. That it doesn't matter the fact that they've lost species and had new species introduced, that they've been managed as a pasture for 150 years, that they're incredibly young and they lack all of the diversity both within forests and across our landscape that they had for thousands of years, that all of our biodiversity that's adapted to forests that look and behave completely differently than the forests that we have today, that all of that will just be fine if we just leave it alone. And it's not true. As people who manage or care for or love ecosystems, it's important that you know that ecosystems are not magic. Like anything else, they are vulnerable and delicate. There are things that this system as a whole and the species that live here need. And not all of those things can be achieved by just doing nothing. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know that I'm really into old growth forests. And one of the reasons is that they provide these templates for the conditions that all of our native species and our forests as a whole have adapted to for thousands of years. Some of those conditions are big trees, but not a lot of big trees actually, usually just 10 to 12 big trees per acre in this area. Structural diversity, so a multi-layered, gappy, irregular canopy with many different sizes and ages of trees, and deadwood on the forest floor. These are three conditions that are incredibly important habitats for wildlife, that are incredibly important to forest resilience, and that are also really, really underrepresented on our current landscape. And if you come into my forest or the forest that I manage, there is more of every single one of those attributes than there would be on a similar unmanaged forest. When I do these things, when I cut trees and pockets of trees to create these attributes, when I thin around healthy trees that are being competed with by less healthy trees, when I encourage species diversity and structural diversity, when I put dead wood on the ground and protect trees from deer browse in the process, the species that are benefiting from these things, they don't care about if it was me or a logger or a windstorm. They don't care about if that work was commercial or non-commercial. All they care about is that those attributes that have been missing from this landscape for a century are here now. Suddenly they have places to nest and den and forage. Suddenly this forest is more resilient and has the ability to withstand all of these effects of climate change. So as we think about what the difference is between a managed forest and an unmanaged forest, certainly it could be true that an unmanaged forest is beautiful and it has all these amazing qualities, and the managed forest is one that's degraded and lacking so many of these important things. But it could also be the case that the opposite is true. All this is to say that management, however challenging it may be, can be just as beautiful and vital and as important as not managing a forest.